I will have pictures of my rink this weekend because my big rink is almost done.
Right.
Anyway, on the Cranky Sports Writers show, Eric Tahajek and I debated the top goalies in NHL history and also the top player in NHL history. And during the course of our Texas cage match, he brought up a column that he had written about 15 years ago about his thought that Gretzky should be inducted both as a player and a builder because of the impact he had in the game in terms of the California explosion and just the growth of the game in America. I mean, as we all know, he was the only guy who had commercial endorsements in that era. And he, there were a lot of people who couldn't name one NHL franchise, but they could tell you that Gretzky was the top player in the game. And it was just kind of a fun concept. And I thought, it's really a fun thing to talk about. And I'm sure if I write it, they'll, people will just get all upset about it. Because
I don't think they will. I mean, why would they? I mean,
I would support it. There's Gretzky haters. Like, there's irrational Gretzky haters that will get excited about it for the wrong reasons, and there's no doubt about that. But I think the large majority would agree with it.
Well, I'm a Gretzky hater in the sense that he deprived the Maple Leafs of a chance to the Stanley Cup in '93. But that being said, I would agree with that point because the NHL expanded, by how many percentage points with him going to California and with his popularity in Edmonton. I mean, he clearly is one of the most influential players in the history of sport, not only in hockey but in the history of sport. So I think that deserves to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree, and he worked at it. Like, as a guy who covered him for the majority of his career. I wasn't covering the league on a regular basis when he first started, but shortly thereafter, like he could work a room like no one. He'd walk in at a press conference and immediately he would lock in on all the reporters that he knew, and always there was a wink or a hey Kevin or a hey Strack or hey Tahacek. Or he put his hand on your shoulder as he walked by. Like, he just, he made you feel like everybody was in it together. There was a real sense of community. He did not view the media as adversarial whatsoever. I think he felt that it was just they were part of the hockey community. So
yeah, he and Gordie Howe are the only two hockey players I've ever seen do that. And then from all written accounts, it seemed like Babe Ruth used to do that on a daily basis for baseball.
Right.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, Gordie liked to, and then he'd offer to pose for a pose. I mean, there are approximately 1 million people in North America who have a photo of them getting an elbow from Gordie Howe. Because he would always put his elbow up next to your jaw when he would, pose for a photo. Like my kids, I got my daughters with, photos of them and Wayne Gretzky. So, or excuse me, it was Gordie Howe. Now I'm confusing the two, but anyway, it was an interesting show for those of you who don't watch the Cranky Sports Writers but are interested in the debate over who's the best player of all time. I recommend you watch the Cranky Sports Writers this week just to get our sense on it. And it wasn't really a
Did you get Eric excited? I've never seen him excited.
No, we the problem we have. I mean, it's not a problem, but Eric and I agree on most things.
That is an issue.
And on this one, we have differing views. He likes Wayne Gretzky as the number one, and he makes his case, and I like Gordie Howe, and I make my case. But both of us, ended up talking about the greatness of the other candidates. I
wish I would have been on that show, Kevin, because I would have said my vote would have been Bobby Orr.
Yeah, no, and that's a legitimate. The problem with Bobby Orr is he just didn't play long enough. I mean, when you're splitting hairs, durability matters, and length of career, because there's no denying all the greatness. Even Mario Lemieux. Like, what if Mario Lemieux had not been debilitated by back injuries or back problems for the better part of his career? This is a guy that even when they won the Stanley Cups, they had to have someone tie his skates because he couldn't bend over. I mean,
Or
you know,
his career numbers if he hadn't been struck with the the cancer complications.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, so I always include Mario
Yeah.
in my big four, and I've said for years A1, A B, AB, or was 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D.
Yeah, it's got to be that
You know,
way. And I mean, my thing on Mario, we didn't even talk much about Mario. I took Bobby Orr kind of. It's sort of we took sides. I was playing a little bit of devil's advocate because you guys had taken Howe and Gretzky, but it's so. I mean, with Mario, I'll never forget. One of my top 10 most memorable moments was watching, his comeback game and seeing him dominate.
Against Toronto.
That to me showed how incredible the guy was. I mean, he had gone away from the game for a few years or something like that.
4 years. 4 years.
4 years, right. Comes back in and immediately, from the time the puck drops, transcends all the players on the ice. And that just was, holy cow, that just, it was otherworldly, really otherworldly.
Well, two things about Mario. One, when he scored the goal every which way, the empty net, shorthanded, power play, even strength, etc. A penalty shot, that was amazing. But my favorite moment is on, when he goes to the Spectrum after coming back from cancer, and he had his last radiation treatment that day. That's remarkable. When you have a radiation treatment in the morning and then you play that evening. Just phenomenal. Anyway, Mike, you were saying?
Well, I was just saying, if we ever have a goal, like a really in-depth goaltender debate, I think it has to be sort of like, I mean, for me, like I studied goaltenders. I was a goaltender. Not the fact that I could really skate, but I mean, I've always been very interested in goaltenders, and guys like Plant and Sawchuk and Glenn Hall. I've always put up on a pedestal, even though I'm not old enough to have seen them play. But I always think that if you have a goaltender debate, it's got to be sort of pre-expansion and post-expansion, because I think, because it would be Roy, Hasek, and Brodeur as a debate for, and a couple others. But, I don't know if you can really accurately compare them to Sawchuk or Plant or Hall or any of the great goalies of the 50s and 60s.
Or Dryden. Dryden's always forgotten about. He was making amazing.
Yeah, I mean, his issue is the same thing with Orr's, but for a different reason. I mean, his career just wasn't long enough. But I will tell an interesting. I interviewed Dryden for a piece I was doing on Glenn Hall, and Dryden made an interesting point about. I think Glenn Hall, it might be the most underrated goalie in NHL history. His consecutive game streak. We played more than 500 consecutive games.
Sure.
It's truly remarkable. And people said that Sawchuk's shutout record would never be broken, but Marty Brodeur blew it away. Well, I guarantee you that Glenn Hall's consecutive
that's
503 plus all the playoff games, that will never be broken. I think it was 557 total with the playoffs. But anyway, Dryden said to him why he viewed Hall as a goalie that changed the game is he was the first goalie in the maskless era, and this is what Dryden told me, to put his head below the bar. Like, guys didn't really lift pucks back then, so even though they were maskless, usually they'd only get hit by deflections or occasionally something by accident would go high. They weren't guys that really didn't shoot a lot. So it took a fair amount of courage, Dryden told me, to put your face below the bar, and Hall was the first guy to get down on his knees and play with his face, really where you were trying to shoot the puck, which I thought was really fascinating.
Just the other day, it's so funny you mentioned that. I saw a picture of him just the other day, a fantastic photo. I got to find it.
The one benefit that he had was that he didn't have to face his teammate Bobby Hall most of those years. So I'm sure that was.
I've interviewed him several times, and he always said the most terrifying times he had was in practice, because he always had to face all. And Glenn Hall is so honest. Like, I've talked to him numerous times. I always would interview him about Gordie Howe and such. But he said that even in the maskless era, he said the danger level is a little bit overstated, is what he once told me. He didn't use that word, but that's the what he was saying, and that is because that guys really didn't. There was only like 2 shooters on every team you really had to worry about, is what he would say.
You know, one thing I could add about Jacques Plante, one of his greatest thrills in life was apparently getting a library card when he was a member of the Rangers.
So
wow.
Well, and Glenn Hall was so good as a rookie that he enabled Detroit to trade Sawchuk to Boston. And he took over as the #1 goaltender for the Red Wings in the 50s. I mean, it's just fascinating to see how because you would think that Hall of Famers of the quality of Plante and Sawchuk would have stayed with the same team throughout their career, and Plante and Sawchuk were sort of nomadic. I mean, Sawchuk played for Detroit three separate times.
He was hard to deal with, Mike. He had issues.
I know, but fantastic. Boston, Toronto, Los Angeles, the Rangers. I mean, but a fantastic goaltender. And Plante, the Canadians, the Rangers, the Leafs, St. Louis, Boston. I mean, it was just strange how they moved so much in their careers.
Plante was nutty too. Like talking to John Halligan about him and having him writing about him in a couple books. Plante was very, very quirky to the point where he was not hard to deal with, but they didn't know how to deal with him. He was so different.
He was very bright and he was eccentric.
Yes.
He had a lot of those. But one of my favorite quotes, and I can't remember, it was one of the Plager boys said that he went up to Glenn Hall and he said, I got to come to Saskatchewan and look at your barn. And Glenn Hall said, why in the heck do you want to come to see my barn? He goes, well, that's got to be the most gorgeous looking barn in the history of mankind, because every year you say you can't come to training camp on time because you got to paint the barn. So I want to get a look at this Taj Mahal.
Oh, that's amazing.
Because Glenn Hall obviously Glenn Hall was a real rebel in his era. I mean, he stood up to the man, as they say, and he always tried to get a little more money, and he didn't like to be treated poorly or unfairly, and he stood up. I have such unwavering respect for Glenn Hall, and not only the way he played, because I saw him as a kid late in his career, but just as in the way he conducts himself. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love this kind of stuff, guys. I mean, I know no one in the chat room seems to have a problem with it, but Kevin, I love the stories you guys tell. I mean, this to me is what the show's all about. So, thanks very much for sharing these things. I mean, really great stuff. This is not Glenn Hall, but this is the picture I saw, which I thought was amazing. I don't know what goalie this is, but I just love this photo for so many reasons. This is an old Rangers.
Yep.
The goalie down low.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what amazes me is that I don't understand why it took so long for the world to create activewear. Why people had to go in suits and coats everywhere 24/7, like they weren't sweatpants. Yeah. There was no activewear. That I could not have lived in that era because of that.
they had activewear, but it was considered like a night out.
Pajamas, right? I
mean, this was a big. Going to a game was an event. And you got dressed up. Yeah.
That is Plante in the Montreal goal.
That's Plante, right?
Yeah.
It's like this picture is just so. Now this is. I don't know if this is the era when they still wore their darks at home, so I'm not sure if this is the Forum or Madison Square Garden. I couldn't figure that out. Russ, what do you think?
I think it was probably still the era where they wore the darks at home. That's my guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always made the point about Plante. When I've written about him, is that in his era that people viewed it as that he was afraid, which is why he put the mask on. But I always argued that it was really an act of courage for him to put it on, because he basically, again, stood up. I mean, Toe Blake didn't want him to wear a mask and really told him he couldn't wear a mask. He didn't think he would be able to see the puck properly, and then, Plante went against his wishes and, put one on. And so I think it took a fair amount of courage, and I think he paved the way for everyone else, to put one on. And so I think he's an important figure in NHL history, and I think he had a lot more courage than cowardice. If anybody thinks he put it on because he was afraid, I don't think he was afraid. I just think he thought it was the right thing to do.
Now, Kevin, who was the main goalie for the Blues when they made it to the Stanley Cup and it was Plante and Hall? Who was the real #1 there?
They split.
What? They did the Stanley Cup?
I believe they did, but we'd have to look that up.
I'll look it up.
I don't remember, but
Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
I know they did split for a while, but if I had to guess, I'd say it was Hall. So if they
Yeah,
did,
that's probably right. Wow. All right, let's get going. We'll start the show. This is amazing talk, though. I don't think of anything. I don't think I have anything better than this for the show. So we'll try. We'll do the best we can. Yeah. So if you didn't watch the Cranky Hockey Raiders show, it's really worth watching just to see. I mean, just to see Kevin and Eric go back and forth on. I mean, and the great thing that you said right at the beginning of the show, Kevin, which I loved, was the fact that it's hard for you guys, because the four of you, because you and Eric know all four of the guys we were talking about.
Yeah.
Which is I don't have the luxury of really. They were before my time covering, so I don't really have the luxury of knowing these guys. But to know Gretzky or Howe and Lemieux, that's not a bad thing to be able to take to your dying days, Kevin. I like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, that was that's been the fun of covering the league for 30 years. So.
Yep, there you go. So all right, let's start. So we'll go. We're gonna go Mike, Russ, Kevin again, and then of course we'll end with Josh, who I'm just kidding.
Who's still Super Bowling?
This is still Super Bowling. This is my rendition of Josh. This looks kind of like him, a little bit here.
A little bit.
He'll enjoy that later, I hope. Okay, all right, here we go. Ready? It's the 28th. It's Thursday, right? Okay. Hey, Hockey World, how are you? It's Thursday, August. God, what the
August! It's August! Woo!
It's awful cold for August.
Here's the thing.
It's real cold for August.
I know it is very cold for August. I just, I need more RAM. If anybody out there has RAM that you can install into me and willing to do that, that'd be great. Smiles. Not August. It's actually 4 degrees outside here. Hello, Hockey World. How you doing? It's Thursday, January 28th, 2015.
No, it's the 29th.
Ay. Hey, Hockey World. It's Thursday, January 29th, 2015.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen of Sportsology.com.
And I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
I'm going to give a big E5 to that date because I really believe that is the day. I'm firm on it now. I got it. Lord. Yeah, I get this funny. Somebody sent me the other day. It's like, how can I trust you on rumors when you can't even get the date right? I'm like, well, I don't really think they're the same, but I understand what you're saying, and you can definitely think I'm an idiot. That you're allowed to do. Because I am an idiot.
I think it's part of your charm. I really do.
Charm.
I do. Yeah.
I have a joke with my family and my wife that I will not go more than 48 hours without doing something absolutely ridiculously dumb. But usually the good thing about it is I never hurt anybody else. It's always myself, and I will somehow manage to find a positive spin on it. But that's all I can do. But I will do something stupid.
My opinion, by the way, the best sports writers are those who have sort of a little bit of a reputation of being sort of an absent-minded professor type of
yes.
appearance.
I'll take that one. I'll go with that.
Let me answer the question that we were just inquiring about. Plant and Hall played 68 or 69 and 70 in the finals. In the playoffs, Plant played 10 games to Hall 6 in 69, and they basically split it down the middle in 70. Hall played 7 and Plant played 6, so they pretty much split the duties.
Really? Wow. Okay. So that was. I mean, yeah. That's. You have such respect for those kind of guys.
Now that the idea of splitting goalies in a postseason is verboten. I mean, it's just like there's just no way. That's just one of the unwritten rules. You don't rotate goalies in the postseason unless there somebody just goes terribly south or there's an injury. Otherwise,
unless one of the goalies is Martin Gerber.
So,
right.
Yeah. But that was again. You need extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, exactly. Now I want to do. Speaking of goalies, and we will definitely get to Marty Brodeur because that is timely today. But I wanted to bring this up, and I just lost it. But the whole thing, that the great photo I showed earlier, was a result of me finding this really cool. Oh man, I suck. This is where I mean absent-minded or whatever. I'm doing too many things at once. Let's start with Marty Brodeur while I get this up because I want to talk about another goalie right now. All right, we talked about Marty Brodeur and on the Cranky Hockey Radio show, and I wanted to get your opinion, Russ, because I know you've seen them a ton and you covered them as well. The thing that kind of struck me is the chicken or egg theory with Marty Brodeur. I mean, Eric brought up a really great point at the beginning of the show, saying that the Flames could have drafted Brodeur and traded down and to the Devils, basically traded up to get Trevor Kidd, and then the Devils 10 picks later got Marty Brodeur. And how that would have changed history, if Brodeur had been a Calgary Flame. And would there even be a New Jersey Devils team now is one of the things I thought about. Would the Devils have made it through those early years, when they were going through there. But there's also such a chicken or egg thing with Brodeur's system, the way Brodeur played, by being able to handle the puck, and the way the Devils played by clogging the neutral zone, meaning you had to dump the puck in, was just so unbeatable for a while there. They really were kind of like a match made in heaven. Brodeur's career was made better by being a Devil, and at the same time, Brodeur probably kept the Devils alive.
Yeah, detractors are always going to say he had a Hall of Fame defense in front of him, but really for the last 6, 7, 8 years of his career, that defense kept getting worse and worse and worse, and he kept facing more and more shots than he ever had before. So that argument really went away pretty quickly once those guys retired, got traded, and all those things. So I really think he's the best goalie I've ever seen, best goalie ever. I think it's really hard not to put him in that group. I do.
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, Kevin, you kind of have you basically put him at number one now in your mind?
Yeah, I do. I've moved him up to number one. But what's interesting too about him going in the first round, I think all of us in this business have our own personal tenets of the way we operate. And I've never believed in taking a goalie. I wouldn't say ever in the first round, but I'm always leery. I think it's easier, and this will be interesting for Ross to comment on when he gets back. But I think it's easier to project a defenseman or a forward when they're 18 years old than it is a goalie. And for that reason, if you suddenly gave me control of a team, that would be just a regular tenet for me, which is we're not going to take a goalie high unless it's a really, really a special circumstance. Because you look through the years, I mean, Trevor Kidd is a good example. Jamie Storr, Jimmy Waite comes off top. I mean, there's been a lot of goalies. Nashville took a goalie pretty high not long ago. I can't think of his name now, but I mean, there's been you're just more apt to find a goalie in the 4th or 5th round than you are as in the 1st or 2nd round. So to me, that makes the Brodeur situation even more fascinating, because the Devils identified him, had the conviction to take him into the 1st round, even though, as I said, I think it's hard to project what a goalie is going to be like. We've had a lot of great goalies. So
they're the hardest. They're absolutely the hardest. I don't remember there being tremendous buzz after he got drafted. I know and you go look at his pictures, he was pretty pudgy, so I'm sure that kept a few teams away, worried about his training regimen, because that was certainly talked about too.
That's interesting. I didn't realize that. I mean, we haven't seen many. I mean, what was the highest? One actually, transitioning to my next thing is completely there. But I wanted to get Mike's opinion first on Marty Brodeur in terms of history.
Well, I mean, there's no disputing that he's one of the top 3 goaltenders in like I said, the post-expansion modern era. Him, Hasek, and Roy. You could again include guys like Perrant or guys like Ken Dryden, but their sample size is shortened. I mean, the thing is I think Brodeur's numbers are definitely a benefit of a defensive system. I've always been I've always said that you could have plugged in another number of goaltenders and they would have had comparable stats, but as years have gone on, I've sort of grown to respect Brodeur and his accomplishments more. To think that a guy, if you had plugged in a Mike Richter or plugged in somebody else with the Devils, that they wouldn't have done what he did. So I mean, there's no disputing that he's a fantastic goaltender and a no doubt Hall of Famer in 3 years. I just think he benefited in terms of his wins and in terms of his shutouts from a shutdown system. that Jacques Lemaire system that carried forth through a number of coaches, that defensive system, and played in front of Hall of Fame defenders like Niedermeyer and Stevens, and he really did benefit from that team in front of him as well.
You know, I can't let that go.
Go ahead, Kev.
I can't let that go. This is the age-old argument. I mean, I would obviously argue that the Devils' defensive system benefited by Marty Brodeur's statistics, and these kind of arguments are always made with it wasn't Chris Osgood, it was it was the Red Wings team that did it and all that. But the goalie is part of the unit. Harry Sinden used to talk about this all the time, and it drove him crazy, and it drives me crazy. That they're not exclusive of each other. They work together. The Devils were great and Marty was part of that team, and he was great. I don't think you can separate it. I don't think you can make an argument and say, he benefited from the system. They benefited from each other. I don't think you could have plugged anyone in there. I think his skill set was so unique. His composure, his puck handling skills, his ability to challenge shooters. I think that was part and parcel of the way the Devils played, and I think that was part of what made them such a strong defensive team, that they could play that way because they knew Marty was back there playing. So I don't think you can make any case for him being having benefited from playing that team, other than all good goalies usually play for good teams.
Yeah, and I'll add to that by saying durability. When was Brodeur ever hurt for any length of time?
Once. Yeah.
He always played.
Yeah, he always played, and he was always. I mean, he was a frustrating goalie to play against. I mean, I grew up hating him, because we played him a lot. He made every, if you could get through Niedermeyer and Stevens and Denyenko and all these other characters, then you had to beat Brodeur, and that was nothing, nothing to sneeze at. It was he was, and the fact that the trapezoid literally was made because of him behind the net, by Ed Snyder basically pushing for it. It tells you all you need to know. I mean, that
he set a lot of career records against the Flyers. His 500th win, a lot of stuff. His last 3 or 4 years seemed like every time in Philly he was setting a new record.
And the defenders took less punishment because of his ability to move the puck out. They didn't have to go behind the net and take that hit from the flying forecheckers.
That's for sure.
Flyers. I like that alliteration, by the way. Flying forecheckers.
Flying forecheckers. Flyers. That's fantastic.
I don't know. I'm sure Brodeur has some detractors who are Rangers fans, but he's got to be among the more popular, stars in the game in terms of, it's hard to find reasons to dislike Marty Brodeur. I mean, he's just such a good man. He was a great teammate.
John Avery doesn't like him.
Yeah.
Right. That was a classic thing too, though. I mean, the way that all went down. I mean, that was always, he was such a smart, guy. And as I said in the other show, the era of goaltenders taking front office positions now in the NHL is really fascinating to me. But he's one of those guys who really has, he just knew all about the game, and he still knows all about the game. I think that the one thing that he sort of did, which is very unique to the Devils, was, I think the way the Devils work under Lou Lamoriello, especially entirely, was that they had a group of core players that were sort of above the coach, below the GM. This is something that I always felt like in New Jersey was a strange dynamic. And just I got this from talking to a lot of these players who played there, guys like John Madden, people like that, who were there would always be a core group of players that Marty was always a part of. And in the Devils' heyday, it was Madden, Eliash, Niedermeyer, Gianta. These guys were the guys who were part of this core, and Marty was in there too, and they really ran the show.
Not when Lemaire was there or Burns was there. I would
not as much, I would say, because they were younger, and I do agree with you on that one. But Marty really pretty much was the only goalie in the NHL who said when he was going to play or not. That's what I was told. I'm going to play. I'm not going to play. It wasn't like that's why he played so much, and probably too often at times even. But
let me just expand on one point that Kevin was making about goalies being drafted. I mean, Brodeur was a first-round pick. If you look at some of the prominent goalies right now, Pekka Rinne was an 8th-round pick.
Yeah.
Tuukka Rask was a first, but if you're talking about Roy was a 3rd-round pick, Jonathan Quick was a 3rd-round pick.
Yeah.
Dominic Hasek was a 10th round pick, although that was right when the wall was coming down and those players, so that affected it. But I mean, right now it's and I also think that Barrasso being drafted high in the first round, and he had a good career, but not the career that everybody thought he was going to have, and DiPietro and Lettinen being disappointments, and they were drafted in the top 5. I think that affects things going forward. Even if there's a super goaltender out there that somebody thinks that's a difference maker, I don't think they're getting taken in the top 5 of the first round because goaltenders are so tough to predict.
Other than DiPietro, yeah, I'll give you one more thing too. I mean, again, going back to like Lundqvist, you got Krista Rockstrom, who wanted Lundqvist from the first round on, the same way, Kevin was talking about Brodeur, yet Glenn Sader didn't want Henrik Lundqvist in the first round, so they kept pushing it off. They even took a goalie, Brandon Snee, who played for RPI before Henrik Lundqvist. So it's just sometimes you can find a great argument not to take a goalie. There's always that risk.
That makes sense. I do agree. That's a really good point. So there was a goalie who was drafted in the first round, really high, who is actually dominating the NHL right now, and that would be Carey Price. And he's an example of. I remember when this went down, and how many people in Montreal didn't want them to take Price. They wanted them to take the what's his name, French Canadian kid now who's not in the league anymore. Russ.
Not Gilbert Brulé.
Yeah, Gilbert Brulé. Gilbert Brulé was the guy all Canadiens fans wanted to take at the time this draft went down. They were all Gilbert Brulé, and they took Carey Price. Well, they made the right choice, but.
Brulé had a history of injuries, not his fault.
Yeah, not his fault. I did like Gilbert Brulé too, but Carey Price is now. This comes from the same place I got that picture. There's a guy at Dr._Habs, Mark Dumont. So I take this right from his Twitter feed. Carey Price's stat line since December 7th: 11-2-1 with a 1.64 goals against and a .946 save percentage. I
told you that's why he's my MVP.
Yeah. It's a little hard to argue there. That's a hell of a stat line. I mean, look at that. I mean, that is an MVP.
If you're looking, I think there's the thought process is that it's sort of hard to figure out why the Canadiens have been so successful. Well, it's really not. You don't have to unlock the mystery. Carey Price has really been good, and not that their team hasn't been good as well, but there's so many good teams now in the East that when you start looking at the goals for and goals against and all that kind of stuff, you sort of wonder a little bit about whether Montreal should be where they are. Well, they should be because Price has played that well.
Yeah, he's allowed 23 goals in 14 games, facing 30 shots a game.
I say this too. I mean, Carey Price got pigeonholed a little bit early in his career. Fans in Montreal just sort of being down on the franchise. He was young. He had some bad moments, but he's been getting better and better every year. I mean, he did win a Calder Cup, too. I mean, I watched him play at that time, and I watched him when he was playing against Hershey, and he was fantastic. He was the reason then, too. So it really doesn't shock me, but sometimes it takes a goalie a little while to sort of get to this point, and that's what we say. Sometimes it takes them until they're 25.
Yeah, and there was that crossroads when a lot of people in Montreal wanted them to keep Halak and not keep Price. So
I remember that, yeah. I mean, Montreal made the right decision twice with him.
That's crazy talk.
Yeah. I know now it is, right? But at that time, remember what Halak had just done.
I do remember. Yeah, the playoff run for sure.
That was the crazy thing about that, right? So it's completely nuts. And I mean, he's been absolutely fantastic.
And that's one of the benefits for Montreal is the fact that they don't need to score a ton of goals to win games because of Price. But when it gets to the playoffs, as was proved last year, and we talked about it in previous webcasts. I mean, they got the benefit of guys like Brodeur and guys like Rene Bourque scoring key goals at key times to get them to the conference final, and only when Price got hurt did things sort of fall apart, even though Tokarski played well. If they're going to advance this year in the playoffs, they're going to have to make those acquisitions to bring in goal scorers that can fill in for Brodeur and Bourque for them to advance. But if they keep Price healthy, they have just as good a chance as anybody to advance to the final in the Eastern Conference.
Well, I thought they made one more mistake too, Montreal, that they're not making now. They had Nathan Below in and out of the lineup, and he's a really good, slick, puck-moving defenseman, but he was a rookie, and they didn't want to use him, and they should have used him. They needed him against the Rangers' speed, and they didn't use him.
Yeah, and this year they have him on the second pairing with Gonchar, and he's playing pretty well. He's playing close to 20 minutes a game, and I think they've learned their lesson on that score.
Yeah, I'll say they have. I mean, funny that you mentioned Danny Briere, because last year when I was talking to Danny during the season, he said flat out, and this is the guy who played with Hasek. He played with Ryan Miller. Danny said that Carey Price was by far the best goalie he ever played with, and that's what he said. He just said he just was the hardest goalie to score against. He was the toughest mentally, and he said that and that's that's good company. I mean, for what it's worth, that's good company, right? So.
I mean, going back to where we started this argument,
yeah,
there are examples, obviously, and Carey Price is one of them. I mean, Fleury obviously was taken high and has delivered for the Penguins, but he's had ups and downs. So it's not that it never happens. It just, I just think it's harder to predict. I'd rather take my chances on projecting the growth of a forward.
Right.
Even defensemen are harder than forwards, in my opinion, but.
Yeah.
If everything was tied, I think I'd want the forward just for that reason, because they're easier to project.
Yeah, and I say this too. A lot of people don't give Craig Patrick the credit for trading up to get Fleury because, no offense to Crosby, Malkin, anything else, if they didn't have Fleury, they wouldn't have won a cup because that was the one position they had nobody for in their organization. Craig Patrick saw it, he traded up, and he got him.
Yeah, it was a real, and people ripped Fleury, but it was a hell of a run he had there, and if he gets that back, that's what they still need. That's what the Penguins are still going to need. Moving forward, they're definitely going to need good goaltending. What'd you watch last night, Mike? What game were you watching?
Well, I mean, there was only 3 games last night, and I watched some of all 3.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to stay awake through the Toronto-New Jersey game. It could have been the worst game of the year. It was nothing. 50 minutes in, Toronto scored, New Jersey tied it with less than 2 minutes, and then the Devils won in a shootout. It was just a dreadful performance. I mean, the Devils are ready for, they have about 15 members of the AARP on that squad. And Toronto has absolutely no confidence whatsoever right now. They cannot put the puck in the ocean. And it's unbelievable that this team that was leading the NHL in goals about a month and a half ago has now Jonathan Bernier has lost 7 of his last 8, and in the 7 games that he's lost, the team has scored 6 goals.
Yeah, and I'll even add to that. Our friend Chris Johnston pointed out that the Leafs power play was running at around 20-point-something% before the coaching change, and now it's at like 14.3.
Yeah, I mean they've improved on their analytics. Their Corsi numbers are better, but they stink. I mean they cannot play a two-way game, and it's terrible. The Pittsburgh-Washington game, we talked about them getting LaPierre and how I think that was aimed toward making them a little bit of a more tougher team, a little more sandpaper to get towards the playoff. I mean, Washington, I thought ran roughshod over the Penguins last night. There was a couple notable scuffles. Letang got flipped by Troy Brouwer late in the game. I think Jim Rutherford still has some work to do in terms of padding that team with a couple veteran forwards in the bottom 6 to help out his core group, because that team is still getting pushed around a bit. And Steve Downey got bloodied in a confrontation in that game. But the game of the night was Chicago and LA. It was like the playoffs all over again. It was a phenomenal game, and it ended 4-3 with the Kings winning on a goal by Jake Muzzin late in the 3rd period. I mean, I stayed up to watch that game, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, that was great, and it just had it had memories of last year, which was great. It just what a series it was, and it was good to see, because we didn't know. I mean, we just don't. You don't know what we have in LA right now, and I hear LA is getting very close to making a trade for a defenseman at this point, and wouldn't surprise me if that happens soon. And the 2 names that I heard, over I'm sorry, I'm getting texts at the same time here, man, but I heard Robidas being a big possibility for them, and I could see that. Could you see that, Kevin, Robidas?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely going to get a defenseman. I don't think there's any question about that. The word that's been leaking out of Arizona now that Yandel would be a hard acquisition for anyone. I mean, they want a lot for Yandel. I was reading some of the trade rumors online, and I know for a fact that some of the packages that I've seen rumored aren't even remotely close to what they want. I mean, they're not going to take just a load up the hefty bag.
Right.
They want potential premium players who are young and already playing in the league. What the Kings certainly will want is a transition defenseman, a guy that can move the puck, like Voynov can, and they want a guy who can log some minutes. You got to eat some minutes, because what ends up happening, as we all know, is when you take a 20-plus minute defenseman out, guys who are not accustomed to playing not only the number of minutes, but the kind of minutes. They're playing out of position. It's like in tennis, when the number 3 singles guy has suddenly got to play number 1 or number 2. He's just not as effective. And I think that's what you got going on there. But I thought last night was a real statement by the Kings. There's been a lot of talk about, boy, they have really slipped, and Richards has obviously been moved out as sort of symbol of the fact that that the team can't stay together now and try to win it again, and they come up with a big win, and that was a very big win. And that playoff series between Chicago and LA last year, I mean, that's one of the better series of the last 5 years, and I think. Yeah. My point would be, let's not write off the Kings quite yet. I mean, they are still an interesting.
They still have it. I know. I'm with you.
The Kings are kind of like the San Antonio Spurs. They're not like sitting their players purposely, but we don't see the same game out of them early in the season that you do in March. It's just the way they are. But I'll give you something else, too. Rather than going out and getting a player, they do have Derek Forbort still percolating in the minors, and he's gotten bigger and stronger. He's got 11 points this year. He's a plus 16. I know people have given up on him because he was a 2010 first-rounder, but the Kings don't give up on anybody. It wouldn't shock me at some point if they try and work him into the lineup.
Well, I mean, and that's a possibility. But I mean, in terms of the names that Eck mentioned in his column, both Robidas and Roman Polak are under $3 million. I mean, Polak has been really, really good and a veteran of the Western Conference. Right-hand shot. I'm not sure if the Leafs are going to want to give up on him because he's under contract for another year. They like him. He's sort of a building block type of defenseman, a tough guy who sort of counterbalances their young guys like Riley and Gardner. Robidas, he's got 2 years left. I think they would probably give him up for very little because I think they're looking to move younger. And he was brought in as a defenseman to sort of bolster the leadership of Phaneuf. And if they're going to move Phaneuf, then you don't need the bolstering of the leadership. And Robidas is a very good teammate, very well liked around the league. He's leading the team in plus minus, even though he's been out for a few weeks. And he was a key component when the Leafs were winning in December, and his injury problems have sort of coincided with their slump. So I wouldn't be surprised that if cost is the factor here with the Kings and what they would have to give in return, that they would get Robidas and have to trade very little to get him back, or to give back. So I think that's a strong possibility.
I mean, I think Robidas going down last year in the playoffs killed the Ducks. I mean, I really do. I thought that was a really big injury for them.
I thought their coaching killed them, but I thought they had a great team.
Yeah, but I think that Robidas, I was amazed at how he made that transition so quickly. People in Dallas, I've talked to just love Robidas. They just say he's such a great guy around the room, great player. And I think the Kings obviously saw that last year.
He is terrific when he plays, but these days he's made out of paper mache. He really just can't stay on the ice.
Yeah, but it's go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I'm just wondering too, like the contract situation. I can't remember exactly how many years did he get?
He got 3. This is year 1 of the 3.
Yeah, see, the Kings would be reluctant, I think, to take 3 years back. I mean, the money's right, but that'll make it challenging for Lombardi going forward. Once everybody, well, I guess it depends if you feel Voynov is going to be back or not. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And even if these things are cleared, I mean, it's the possibility of him never playing with the Kings again because just the PR aspect of it.
I mean that's fair, but well, my point would be you got to reconcile that then before you commit to that,
Sure.
3-year contract. Right. But I think that is fair to try to come up with that.
And the one thing that might be a mitigating factor is the fact that Robin Regeer's contract drops off after this year. So it's sort of, if you trade for a guy like a Polak or a Robidas, it sort of fits into that space in terms of salary. And the thing is, it's not like you're going out in free agency and bidding on a defenseman because there's no cost certainty of how much you're going to have to pay for a second or third pairing. Here, the guy is already locked up on contract, and you might even get Toronto to retain a little bit of it just to make the deal happen. So I think it's a possibility.
But I do think the second, I mean, especially the third pairing, more so than the second. But you got to try to work those younger guys in, like Russ was talking about, and that's how you make it work for the guys up top. Is you got to have 4 or 5 guys on your team that are making the minimum.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. You got to have that. You got to make that work, or you have to have you have to have guys on rookie contracts. That's the other thing that teams have to have to go far. I mean, you have to have a couple. I've always believed a couple.
Remember, Dwight King got worked in. They've always had guys that they've worked in. Muzzin got worked in at the time.
Yeah, that's true. And then it's easy to work guys in on teams that are successful. That have winning traditions and that have so many players who are so confident.
It's also easy to work in guys on teams that are not successful. I mean, Phaneuf was out of the lineup last night, and the Leafs played a defense with a 22-year-old Petter Granberg in there who played one game prior, in his NHL career, with Corbinian and Holzer playing out of position, and they played one of their better games on the blue line last night. Granted, against a team that really can't score that well in New Jersey, but they've been playing below average teams the last couple weeks, and they've been giving up lots of opportunities. It was a window into the post-Phaneuf world in Toronto if they trade him, because these are the guys like Riley and Gardner who are going to play the major minutes if Phaneuf is traded.
Yeah.
I think he's untradeable with that contract. I
don't think so, Russ. I don't. They may have to take something back, but I think he's movable.
Oh, we're talking about Phaneuf?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm with Mike. Yeah, he's tradable. Yeah, there's still a fascination with Phaneuf. He's not the perfect hockey player, and I think he's a part of the problem in Toronto. But you can always convince yourself that a guy that gritty can move into your team and can adjust his game. I mean, that's what sports is all about. Is one guy's pessimism is another man's basis of optimism. So
right.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. But I think he is tradable, much more so than Richards.
Yeah, and the point, and the funny thing is, the point of view of Toronto and the media in Toronto regarding Phaneuf is so vastly negative. And reading things about Phaneuf, from like say Mike Heika from Dallas Morning News or other outlets, they seem to have a much more positive outlook regarding Phaneuf. So, the aspect of Toronto and what they think Phaneuf is worth and what everybody else thinks he's worth is completely 180 degrees. So I think there's opportunities out there to move him and get something for him.
Wait, how many more years are left on his deal, and what's his annual cap hit?
6 years left at $7 million per.
Ugh.
Which is
a lot, but they'll take some of it. The Maple Leafs will take some.
Oh, they're gonna have to. Yeah, you're gonna have to take a lot of it, I think.
Unless they take a contract back.
Right.
I mean, that's what they would have to do. But I mean, that's the big reason. But that's a big problem because teams, Toronto might not be willing to take a contract back. I mean, it might not be worth it for them. I mean, they have to replace Dion Phaneuf if they get rid of him. I think that's like, and that's not that easy to do.
Well, there's some. Go ahead, Russ.
No, he's right. I mean, at the end of the day, you do still have to replace him, and he is still a guy that has value as far as to the team, points-wise, minutes-wise, and who's exactly going to take his place.
Well, there's some theory that the whole reason that the Leafs want to move Phaneuf out would be to re-sign Cody Franzen, and that Cody Franzen would be the guy that they would put that burden on. But I don't know, because Cody Franzen, he has defensive problems like most of the Leaf defensemen do, and I'm just not sure he's capable of that. And I don't think he's a $5.5 to $6 million defenseman, which he's going to get in free agency, just like Matt Niskanen got, just like Brooks Orpik got. Everybody gets overpaid. He's not.
I mean, it's different when you're playing with Pittsburgh than when you're playing with Toronto. Like Niskanen had the advantage of playing with Pittsburgh and people knowing him, and and this is different. One thing I forgot to mention yesterday, which I got a lot of heat from our wild viewers, which not wild viewers in terms of as an adjective, but actually wild in terms of a noun. Minnesota Wild viewers, was that I didn't show Charlie Coyle's goal from the other night, from 2 nights ago. All right, so I wanted to do that really fast. This actually comes via Mike Brem on USA Today. From he had this posted. This GIF, which is from another, but this goal was pretty crazy. This was apparently ESPN's play of the night, which is rare for hockey in and of itself, right? So here it comes. Sorry.
It's rare that ESPN acknowledges hockey. Period.
Yeah, so they would acknowledge hockey at all. But this goal was pretty crazy. This breakaway he scores from behind the net essentially. It was an awesome goal. Charlie Coyle is a hell of a player, and I don't he has his moments when he's up and down, but I mean the Wild. When you talk to people on the Wild about him, I mean they are incredibly high on Charlie Coyle.
Yeah, the only goal that comes close to that from a reach standpoint was Vanek, the one he did in college, I believe.
Right. I mean he is literally against the boards behind the net.
Yeah.
When he puts that puck in the goal, that's what's crazy. I mean he's literally that was a heck of a play. So yes, there's Charlie Coyle. There's our Wild moment for today.
The last thing I'll add about the Leafs is, they have Matt Finn and Stuart Percy, and they fit the bill of every other Leafs defenseman. Can move the puck, can skate, have offense in their game, but a little shaky on D. They just don't have anybody who can play real defense anywhere in that organization.
Well, Granberg is that type of defenseman. He's more of a stay-at-home guy. The kids that they've drafted from Sweden are pretty much defense. Victor Love and Tom Nilsson, but I don't think they're NHL ready yet. They're going to need at least a year or two in the AHL. But I think Granberg is an NHL defenseman, and I think finally that these young guys are going to get the opportunity to play because I think they are going to clear out Franzen. They may clear out Phaneuf. They possibly could trade Robidas, and the whole part of the rebuilding program is to give your young players a chance. And I think they have some young players who could play in the NHL. They just have never had the patience or the opportunity to give them a chance to play in the NHL.
If they can bottom out enough, they might be able to put like Zach Werenski on their radar. That would help them a lot.
Yeah, I mean, here's my theory on them is that right now you're looking at a team that's playing with a lot of. I mean, they're not scoring goals because they're trying to play this new style, right? So this shows you what the other coaches were doing. The other coaches ended up with them playing this crazy style because literally, that's how they have to play to score goals. I believe that's what it comes down to. So if you're going to play this other defensive style, they're not going to score goals. So
Randy Carlyle was forced to play a Ron Wilson wide open offensive style because that's right. That was left.
And now you're seeing what happens when you don't do that. You don't, they're going to bottom out this way. But it shows the weaknesses.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's the bottom line. So, yep. But yeah, that to me is pretty simple. Brodeur is a little upset about not getting 700 wins. I read this today, which I thought was interesting. He's 691. He lands at, but he was pretty funny. He says, it's because of the lockouts. He's dead on right. I mean, he would have 700 wins if it weren't for the lockouts.
Sure. Yeah.
But he's a part of the lockouts too. Like he can't go that route.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. All right.
I'm just saying. Players are a part of that.
That's true. Players were a part of the lockout. Yep. That's true.
Now, I have to confess I didn't watch the entire press conference, but apparently there was not one mention of the Devils. I heard reports that he hardly mentioned anything regarding New Jersey.
I don't know. That's a tough one, I mean, because it obviously, I mean, he's going to be back with the Devils. I mean,
we say that we don't know.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it in any way, shape, or form. I think that he went and talked to Lou Lamoriello about this. You have a story about this whole thing, Kevin, coming up with
Yeah, I talked to Lamoriello about it, and he just basically said that he had talked to Marty about it. He was supportive of Marty, and he said Marty's a devil, and he knows. In fact, he said he knows he's a devil, and I think Marty does know that. But I just think this is a classic case of you're going to have to serve an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
joined the front office. Well, I think it makes more sense, and it's a more logical decision to go elsewhere. He knows the way the Devils run the operation.
Yeah,
He's going to see how it. Now, is it possible? Is it possible that he could, find love in St. Louis in terms of, the position there? Yeah, sure it is. But I think ultimately, if the job, if GM was offered to him in New Jersey as opposed to another team, I think he'd go to New Jersey.
Yeah, I think he has to. I mean, he's so in it. I mean, his family is so entrenched in there, and it's just and the ownership and the Devils will pay him anything he wants to keep him there. I mean, they're not gonna let that go.
And his son was drafted by the Devils.
His son was drafted by the Devils. Yeah.
I know we say all those things, but yet it didn't happen, and that was part of his week off.
Yeah.
That he was going to be talking to the Devils and see what he could get there. So what are we to believe that the Devils didn't have any spots available, like Oates and Stevens are blocking all the spots? Then what is it?
I think we're to believe that the Devils are going nowhere this year, and the Blues are going to go to the postseason, and his contract goes to the end of the year, and they'll make decisions afterward. Now, I don't disagree with your thought that things could happen. He could love it there, but I think that's possible. But I think ultimately, he'll end up with the Devils.
Here's good news for Predators fans. Pekka Rinne is taking the morning skate today. He's taking shots. He's out there on the ice. He's not ready yet to come back, I hear, but Pekka Rinne taking the morning skate. That's significant. I watched the Predators Avalanche game 2 nights ago, and the Preds just they doubled up the Avalanche on shots. I mean, that was the crazy thing. I mean, the game was won in overtime by Nashville, but it was so apparent, and never before could I think I was more right, Kevin, than I am now, that they need another goalie. I mean, because they're doubling up the Avalanche on shots and have to win it in overtime.
Yeah, Carter Hutton's not a great goalie.
It's just not the answer.
Speaking of goalies, at the risk of being Josh Remmer here, the news I saw this morning was that Terry Fry, who I really respect, I believe it was Terry Fry, put out there that the possibility of the Avalanche perhaps trading Varlamov because Pickard has been so good. Right? Yeah. And I mean, that would be truly remarkable in my opinion, because Varlamov is a fine goalie, and if Varlamov would get moved, and I have no inside knowledge on that, but I mean, we really are running out of chairs in the game of musical chairs. Like, if he went somewhere else, there aren't many teams looking for goalies as it is. So if he filled one of those spots and Pickard got the Colorado job, I mean, it's just getting harder and harder and harder to find a job as an NHL goalie.
Well, based on
Minnesota. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Russ.
I would think Minnesota would be all over that. They'd have to be.
Colorado would never trade him to Minnesota.
Well, that's what I think. But
I mean, and the other team that would make sense based on what Eck has mentioned the last couple times is San Jose. If they're so disenchanted with Andy Niemi and Alex Stalock is not exactly the poster child for being a number one NHL goaltender, then a Varlamov would make a lot of sense for them. But
the issue here is playoff performance. Like, Varlamov is Antti Niemi in a lot of ways to San Jose, because Varlamov's last year, in the playoffs, the perception is that he let them down, and then he left.
It was the injury to Tyson Barrie that killed him.
For sure.
I agree with you, but also there's the perception that Varlamov let the Russians down in the Olympics. There's a lot of people out there who don't know if he is a money goalie, and I think that if Colorado is thinking of moving him, that's got to be in the equation for it.
Well, let's do a show of hands here. Who would rather have Varlamov over Niemi?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
No, I do agree with that.
And cap ramifications. Varlamov, his new deal, I think he's a year into it. I think he's making around $6 million.
Yeah,
they have McKinnon to sign. If they don't trade O'Reilly, they have O'Reilly to re-sign. I mean, they have to consider those things. And they really, if they're going to improve on their defense, which, we've said many a time, you've got Johnson, you've got Barry, and you've got nothing else, they need money to be able to sign or trade for a defenseman that will improve the depth of their blue line. So maybe it's a case of moving out Varlamov to add and to, make those signings.
In my opinion, he'd be a great fit in Buffalo. Buffalo should be the team that goes after him. I mean, nothing against the Sabres goalies, but I think that neither of them are necessarily, the guy who can take you and a young team forward. You know, like you want.
Well, who are you counting as the Sabres goalies? Because Makarov is quietly playing pretty well also in the AHL, and he's the guy that could emerge.
He's 2 years away.
Yeah, where does where does Niemi end up next season? I mean, he'll clearly find work, but where does he go? If the Sharks are going to allow him to move on, and
I could see him ending up in Philadelphia. To be honest, I think Ray Emery, as this is Emery's last year.
So you see him as a backup to Mason, or
as a co-player with Mason probably.
Interesting. So
because I think that although they like Mason a lot, obviously I think that this is I could see it.
I mean, what's Craig Anderson's contract in Ottawa? At some point, they've got to get a goalie, and they don't believe in Leonard, so.
Well, they just signed Anderson to an extension.
Yeah, he's there.
So he's their guy.
There. So yeah, there's tons of stuff there. We were at our 2:00 deadline here, guys. This was a really fast show. My goodness, holy cow. But thanks so much, Kevin. Check out Kevin at USA Today, of course. Check out Russ at Sportsology and on HockeyBuzz in our Rangers blogs. Yep. I am coming tonight, Russ, with my Chromebook for you.
I won't be there tonight. Saturday. Bring it Saturday.
All right. No problem. I'll see you Saturday then.
I'm gonna see you Saturday when the Flyers beat the Toronto Maple Leafs handily.
That'll be a fun game to attend. Anyway, so we'll see you guys soon. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Please subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Lots of you are, and I really appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.